Welcome back to Britain Plays Card Games.
Bandit Keith.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Jova, I guess.
So you managed to beat a few minor duelists. Well, let's see how you fare against my machine deck.
No, we should have a British accent.
In the UK.
In the UK.
I thought he was Canadian, actually.
Well, in
Does
the
even exist in this universe?
well, that's in the abridged continuity, but yeah.
Yes, that's the joke, Pedro.
Does Canada even exist? TO 2022.
Combined
Honestly,
with the
we don't
statement
know.
about France that I did, I forgot exactly where. I guess it's very easy to misunderstand on that front.
Honestly,
Go.
that's the ironic thing, Tio. Canada is like if France and Britain got drunk and had this weird love child, because Canada is pretty much a mixture of British and French folk. Weird as that is.
Although it's kind of amusing
Yeah.
how the United States originally wanted to annex Canada as well, but nobody, including eventually the people who succeeded from the British Empire and still former Canada, wanted to do anything with the United States.
Yeah, basically to this day, even though to this day the Union Jack is still on the flags of a few Canadian provinces.
Mhm.
I'm sure you guys are very proud of that.
Oh, yeah, for the major part, we still have that the shit posting maple leaf.
Indeed. It's indeed. Again, it's one of those. It's a fun gag, at least that the whole. I'm actually from Canada.
Is there a fancy British term as a synonymous for bandit?
Crook.
There you go. We call in this case Crook Keith.
Crook Keith.
Although in my country, if I recall correctly, the character was instead called Bandit Ken, I think.
Ken?
I need to check. Yeah, I don't know why. Another weird check. At least with the Weevil, name change that I mentioned a few parts ago, that I can understand because, it's incorporating the Japanese name in some kind of fashion, even though it's one. But Bandit Keith just feels weird.
Mm-hmm.
Butcher Keith.
Isn't Butcher more like associated to murder rather than just, being a criminal?
Well, he did try to murder Pegasus.
That is true, I guess.
There you go. Summon Skull. Attack Golgoyle? Okay. Alright.
Oil?
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Summon Skull. Attack with...
Yeah, Samuel's Call kind of looks like shit in this version.
Man, remember when honestly, to be fair, Summon Skull can still be an MVP, ironically.
No, I'm talking about the way it looks, the 3D model.
Oh, I know. I was just reminiscing about... Remember when Summon Skull was like one of the big DMP cards in the game?
That was because it was for a long while, it was tier 0 because it was the highest attack monster that you could summon with just one tribute.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good. And to be fair, he still holds up somewhat to this day thanks to Archfiend decks.
That's the thing, however, the actual cards that they printed instead as complementary for Summon Skull, not Archfiend, but properly Summon Skull stuff, as put by Ranked in Yu-Gi-Oh! Feels like a joke, particularly the Synchro, because guess what? The Synchro is a level 6, and Summon Skull is a level 6, meaning that you cannot use it as material.
I guess they figured that Summon Skull's just too good for that, man.
It's fucking weird, man. It's all because they wanted to keep the theming of being, level 6 and being called Summon Skull, but it doesn't synergize in the slightest.
Like I said before, to me, what made the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game so appealing in the early to mid-2000s was the fact that there was an elegant simplicity to it that still had plenty of strategic depth to it, and was very easy to get into. But and to me, the card game was fine as it was, even in that period, and there was no need to complicate the crap out of it with mechanics on top of mechanics.
Okay, while it has gotten complicated, I do argue that if you were following the series along then, you'd be fine enough. I do feel like it's complicated in the sense where... Well, it's complicated in the sense, say you've been away from any particular game series for a while that has, regular releases across a course of time here and there. Chances are, you leave a series for a while, then come back to it, things will seem more complex with the stuff that they had added on.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the thing, Jova. Like, the reason I stopped playing was exactly because stuff was being. I just don't. It's not so much that I've, you know, like, I have been out of the loop or anything. Even if I was in the loop, I just don't like the changes. I just don't like the changes, period, regardless. It really is one of those cases where the card game had a really good balance and structure and overall style to it, and you just, like, and they just completely, like I said, to me, Yu-Gi-Oh! Without change of art and Pot of Greed and even Graceful Chair, that's not Yu-Gi-Oh! To me. Like, you took away so many iconic cards that
I mean, it's not like they did it for fun, Pedro. Remember, they had to do it because people were exploiting that shit 24/7, and they made, you know, competitions unusable, literally.
I'm okay with that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair though, like, well, I think you can blame more the people who found the loopholes in really breaking that stuff, because again, like, well,
it's like when you know, patches are done to, say, a fighting game in order to rebalance stuff that otherwise would be used exclusively to ruin online.
And to be fair, it wasn't like you could never use those cards elsewhere. It's like, just that
it's kind of
they
like
weren't legal for
D&D.
tournaments.
If you did it for your friends, you could do whatever the fuck you wanted.
Well, obviously. The problem is, Teo, the video games followed suit with the new rules. So if I want to play a Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game with the old rules that I grew up with, I'm boned.
I do not know. Like, I distinctly remember at the very least Tag Force games did allow you to turn it off just for the single player.
And it's funny you mentioned stuff about rules, because I watched the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, and the premise of that is basically the main character is sick of all the constant rule changes and the overabundance.
Yeah, I did mention a couple of parts ago, Dweebs.
Wait. Hey, Pedro, you didn't tell me you were the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, turns out that the protagonist of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7 is Pedro.
But,
yes.
Hold on, I'll let the dialogue begin first before saying.
I can't believe you actually beat me. Me, the card professor of the Rose Crusade.
Card professor?
Oh, wow. So here Keith is a sophisticated gentleman, I see.
Well, he is a British version of Keith, so.
Alright, so who's next?
Alright.
Okay, I will give him his props for actually making his bandana the Union Jack.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe they had to work around with that. It would have been really out of hand to have just the American flag there.
Alright, we have one more.
I don't think America was really, you know...
America was not obviously, America was not involved.
The Labyrinth ruler.
Newcastle.
Also...
Okay, Lancashire.
Who do I go for now? I actually forgot who I go for. Yeah, I guess Labyrinth ruler. Dweebs, you can get this.
Dweebs, he did it in Reshadow Destruction.
Go ahead.
What brings you to this northernmost region? Lost? If you want some directions, you'll have to beat me first.
Well, at least you lost the Chinese accent.
Excuse me, sir. Could you please tell me? I'm seem to be lost. Could you help me with directions? Aha! You'll have to beat me in a card game first. And I'm just.
Yeah. Of the many things I haven't aged well from old dubs, questionable use of accents was one of them.
It's like,
Besides, he's supposed to be British in this universe, so...
I think Gio was talking more so about the fact he's happy that you didn't try doing the accent.
Well, he did in Reshadow Destruction, but I can understand why. But let me mention something else. The reason why I managed to get back into the loop instead myself a few years ago, not a few years ago, but relatively recently, regardless, was because in terms of mechanic, as I could get as far as XYZs, or XYZs as we're called, from Zexal, because Zexal is a terrible series, but the mechanic of XYZs, as the new type of monster being introduced, wasn't still that bad. It can still work enough. But Banart 5 arrived with the fucking pendulum mechanic, which I don't understand who thought it at Konami was a good idea, at the OCG or TCG department, because to put it in very layman's term, because again it's very complicated on its own, it was constructed in a way that sped up the game immensely, and allowed duels to be ending basically one turn, or when it comes to official ruling terms, allowing FTKs left and right on that front, because of its ruling, you could summon a bunch of insanely powerful monsters from the get-go and chain that to activate their effects in order to actually, win the duel instantly on your first turn.
I love
I
love how they ban all those iconic cards that I mentioned before because they were broken, only to introduce a new mechanic that breaks the game even further.
Well, to be fair, that's why the ban list gets updated regularly. For example, in recent times, they unbanned stuff like Yatagarazu. So, for all we know, stuff that was banned can, still be restored. But
also,
again, I was getting there. So again, the exploitation, and honestly, they couldn't generally find a decent way to fix the problem till the Link era, which arguably did potentially worse, because at that moment it did allow to use only just one type of special summon monster between Fusion, Synchron, XYZ, or Link, just one per player, which meant that a lot of decks that relied on multiple, special monsters to be on the field to do literally anything were completely crippled. Not to mention, the Link monsters were overpowered by themselves, like for example, fucking Needle Fiber, Crystal Anki-Fibrax as it's called, which only now got limited, which still means jack shit for for the long scheme of things. But
let's take a look at Wall Shadow.
Thankfully, only
Wait. Did the Wall Shadow make a bear sound?
I guess. Thankfully, the new recent Master Rule seemingly put things back on a sort of a track, finding the actual balance that
Jesus Christ.
Which is the one we're using Master Duel.
Teo,
Teo,
I get the feeling we need an epilepsy warning for this part.
I'll mention that. Don't use Gate Guardian, kids.
Jesus Christ, that was...
Yeah, that was very intense.
I wonder, so what killed Wall Guardian? The lightning or the flash?
The radio star. But no, again, the recent Master Rule seems to have found finally the balance, things that people are looking for. The only major problem it still retains is the fact that some Link monsters are still way too overpowered for what they're good for. But again, it feels like we're actually getting there in terms of finding a decent balance. And a game recently released like Master Duo showcases the fact that it's actually the game is in a better state than it was in recent times, at the very least.
In fact, if I think there was actually a segment of time where Pod agreed was actually brought back.
I think it's limited. The thing about it is that cards, in order to be banned or unbanned, have to have a reason for it. The reason, like I mentioned a couple of parts ago, the reason why Yatagarazu was banned was because you could lose it in a loop in order to completely shut down both the field of the opponent and not allow them to actually draw, meaning that effectively you have won the duel just by chipping away one turn at a time and not allowing them to do literally anything. The reason why they unbanned it is because nowadays we have a lot of cards that activate their effect inside the deck without you having to draw them, meaning that you can circumvent and escape the ban, under the more right conditions. So at that point, there's no real reason anymore to actually keep him there. So at least there is that. Same goes for I forgot what it's called, Change of Art, which that allows you to take control of a monster. Again, the reason is because the meta has evolved in a way where you don't have to rely anymore, and the old loops have finally had things that circumvent them without having the ban. It's not just a matter of literally blockading completely. The meta is to find ways for people to actually not be encouraged to find exploits. So
ironically enough, Pedro, in a sense, the meta constantly changing allows for those cards that you like to be eventually allowed back in.
I can still see what Pedro is coming from in a way, because again, like he said, as far as I'm concerned, both Links and Pendulums should not exist in the life test. I'm sorry. Especially because they paved the way also to some very ugly cards like the Dimensional Dragons.
Like, for example, what I would really love would be for a Yu-Gi-Oh game that allows me to play online with my friends from back in the day using those exact same rules and loops that were the thing back in the early 2000s. Problem is, if you want to play, let's take Legacy of the Duelist, for example. Legacy of the Duelist allows you to play offline, is specifically in the Duel Monsters campaign, with just the original stuff, because they only started introducing the pendulum summon stuff later, like in 5Ds or so, I think, if I remember correctly. And
Arc 5.
Yeah,
Arc 5 was
or Arc V. Okay, fine. The point is, you can do that offline if you want. Problem is, if I want to play online with my friends, the problem is, when you play online in Legacy of the Duelist, you have to abide by the current rules of which cards are limited. So basically, in Legacy of the Duelist, you can't use Raigeki, for example, online, even if you're just playing as now, don't get me wrong, if you're playing on ranked or anything that's like a competitive thing, then definitely I completely understand. But even playing as a friend that I invite to a match, just one friend of mine from my friend list, even that I'm still limited to following those rules. So I don't really have the means to play online the way I want. That's the basic point that I'm trying to make.
I would say that is more a fault of the video game as opposed to the card game itself. In regards to what they ban or limit in that regard. Now again, I, for the most part, often do get where they're coming from and how they manage what's limited or banned. Trust me, I hated it when Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning was banned. Thankfully, he's unbanned now. But in a sense, I do get why they do stuff here and there. It's to make it more fair at the tournaments here and there. And again, credit, if you wanted to play, say in a custom tournament, you could still use those. Those were just for the top official stuff. So
definitely.
I wasn't too bugged by it.
My problem is that, yes, like you yourself said, it's more of a fault of the video games, and I feel like the video games are using the official TCG stuff as gospel and don't give option, because Duel Links then isn't allowed to do that even, I think. I
don't know much about Master Duel to see if it's very either.
So it's one of those cases where it's just like, again, if you want to play these newer Yu-Gi-Oh games, you have to basically abide by the current rules. So people who, like me, we have to stick to the physical card game, so we can just play the way we want. So it's one of those things where it's just like, I don't know, it's just one of those things for me. I mean, where it's just like, I really like the way the card game was in its early years, to be honest with you, and I really missed those things, because I feel like there was it wasn't the most, like you guys said, there are exploits that can be taken advantage of and all that stuff, but at the same time, I feel like we could have tried to fix those exploits without completely reworking the way the card game works,
Okay, to be fair, I don't think that they made those newer card summoning types as a way to make the game more balanced. I do attribute those more to them trying to spice the game up every now and then. And to be fair, I can get it. I will say this right now. I actually did grow to like synchros. I was okay with the XYZ system here and there. And heck, some of the new gimmicks that were introduced in the GX series.
The quote waves.
Guys.
Unbelievable! You've won yourself a light to guide you out of this labyrinth.
And he's in Newcastle, by the way.
Hey, it's perfect. There's an L on your
brother, wherever he is.
Perfect. There's an L on your forehead, by the looks of things. But,
he leads back to Pegasus. So
yeah, like I was saying,
next part we'll do it. Okay.
Honestly, up until Pendulum and Link summoning, I was all for these new additions. It felt like they at least added nice and new ways. And I will say this, even with the issues that they have brought up, and trust me, just check out the awesome Team APS videos that pretty much make fun at how Link summoning, of all things, really changed up the game. I can't hate them, really. Now, mind you, I do feel like in a better weighting system, they might have been made into, their own different types of card. In probably a perfect world, Pendulum and Link summoning would have either been done in a way that doesn't needlessly complicate the heck out of things, or they would have been made into, their own different versions of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist game. But as they are, and again, not to say it's not workable. If you learn the ins and outs, you should be fine. However, it is unfortunately to a point where if you try and use an old school deck, chances are you're gonna get creamed.
Not just that. Again, the links work as best when they work as support in small quantity. The gimmick about Link is that instead of having a defense set, they have arrows that point to a direction, and their effect applies towards the area where they actually point. Now, a good Link monster will provide, like I say, a boost of some kind or a particular effect to the monsters where it points. You can place that monster in the specific part of your monster zone, so that it affects the monster exactly where you want to do in that kind of sense.
You know what?
The problem is that a lot of these Link monsters instead were disgustingly overpowered by saying some shit like basically giving you almost like a instant win button depending on where they pointed, and it became just ridiculous on that front. But
I'm curious, Tio, were you one of the poor saps whose first experience with a Link summon was, not even knowing properly what it was when it existed, but when you're in a turn?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Well, it's protagonist, ace monster. Of course it was going to show up. And to be honest, Needle Fiber is much worse, as again in terms of regard. But hold on, Pedro, you wanted to say something?
You know what's the interesting thing about the whole, trying to mix things up? One thing that I never understood is, like, for example, since it's actually used in this game, why they never adopted the deck master concept because that's a cool idea that I always thought.
The thing about the deck master concept is like, well, this game kind of turns Yu-Gi-Oh! Into a board game, partially speaking, and
to be fair, Joe, it's not too much difference in that regard to dimension dice dimension.
Remind me, did they ever make Dice Dimensions into its own real game, or did that just stay
but it not catch caught on, and we made I think 2 games on the GBA about it.
No, what I mean,
that might be why they didn't pursue the whole deck master system.
I'm not the deck leader. In this game, it's a deck leader. I'm not talking about turning it into a board. I'm talking about using the deck master concept the way it was used in the virtual reality season. Where we fought, because the way they do it in the again, by 4Kids standards, the third season is that the duel works the same way. The difference is that you pick one monster from your deck to serve as your deck master, and that deck master has a special ability that you can use. And you can also pick an option to put that deck master into the field as a monster, like on the other monsters at any time in the duel. Problem is, if your deck master gets sent to the graveyard, you automatically lose. I always wondered, if you want to mix it up, implement that into the real card, because that's a cool idea.
Okay. Again, that does sound like a cool idea, but that one is so much of a departure from how the way the game goes that, again, I guess that probably would have more likely have been its own different version of the game, in the sense that, Link summonings and pendulum summonings, those are new attributes to the game, but they don't necessarily change the overall nature that, once life points or some sort of automatic win stuff is done, you lose. Whereas changing it to suddenly about a deck master just change up the rules to the point where they would probably need to make new cards to facilitate that type of game is something. Not to say that it's impossible, mind you. Again, I do feel like it's just that, again, it feels like a thing where it would have probably then have just become its own different version of the game as opposed to a new implementation of it, unless you found very good ways to protect the deck monsters, because here's the thing about monsters on the field, there are so many cards these days that can pretty much ruin your day by destroying a monster on the field automatically, to the point where tying your victory to whether or not a certain monster lives or dies, again, that would require a lot of tinkering, unless you're just super, super prepared with that kind of deck.
I was gonna ask, anyone tried those new Rush duels?
Not yet.
No.
Alright, so I guess we're facing Pegasus in the next part.
Yes, Tail Boy. So tune in for that.
Yeah.